Hello everybody, this is FIDE Master Dalton Perrine, and I welcome you to this Chess Openings 101 Intro to the Queen's Indian Defense video course here today. Throughout this four-part video course, I'm going to be helping you to better understand the Queen's Indian Defense, the different main themes and plans that both white and black are going to try to follow throughout the opening and also continuing into the middle game, how to play the opening yourself, how to play against it, as well as different tactical tricks and different patterns you'll also want to memorize if you're going to play this opening or if you're happening to play against this opening in your own games. So the goal of this video course is essentially for you to get better at this opening so that you can either play it yourself or so that you can know what to do against it if you happen to face it. The better you understand the opening, the better you understand its different structures and plans, then the better your results will be whether you're playing the opening or facing off against it. So the progression of material throughout the video course is going to be as follows. This first video is going to be a basic overview of the opening, as well as a little bit of a brief history behind it, maybe some different players that played this opening. The second video is going to teach you how to play the opening yourself as black. The third video is going to teach you how to play against the opening when you're playing the white side of the board. And the fourth and final video is going to introduce some different puzzles to solve that revolve around some different patterns and maybe some tactics in the opening that you'll want to understand and memorize those patterns usually. So first of all, let's see the basic opening moves that are going to be played to reach the Queen's Indian Defense. So the game will normally start off with d4. It is kind of a d4 opening, though it can come from the 1 c4 as well. But essentially it's going to be set up along this lines. d4, knight f6. c4, e6, knight f3, b6. So this is the start of the Queen's Indian Defense opening, and the Queen's Indian Defense is very closely related to the Nimzo Indian Defense, which has a slightly different move order at the start. The way the Nimzo Indian Defense goes is that white, instead of playing knight f3 on the third move here, white will instead play knight to c3, and black will play bishop to b4, and this is the Nimzo Indian Defense. Not to be confused with what we're mainly going to talk about in this video, of course, which is the Queen's Indian Defense. But they are very closely related. There are going to be some kind of mishmash of ideas as we talk about the opening a little bit. Now, the main connection between these two different openings, whether it's the knight c3 and bishop b4, or it's the b6, the knight f3, b6 here, the main tie-in or the main connection between these two openings really all comes down to the battle for the control of the e4 square that both white and black are going to try to engage in throughout the opening and the middle game. If white is able to get in the pawn advance e4 himself with no downsides, with no way of black stopping it, or maybe white's able to prepare it well then at that point, if white can make the move e4 safely, then generally white is going to be better. He'll have gained a bigger space advantage in the center, and white will have that space advantage last throughout a big chunk of the game. On the other hand, if instead black is able to give white some kind of disadvantage in the process, or maybe black is able to completely prevent the move e4 from happening, well, then black will stand to have good chances as the game goes along as well. So really the big battle in this game does come down to this control of e4. Black is going to try to control it himself and not allow the white pawn to get there. And on the other side of the board, white is going to try to get that pawn up to e4 to gain that extra space. And that's going to be the big battle here. So this is a very hyper-modern opening in the sense that black doesn't typically use pawns to control the 4 central squares very much. Notice how black actually does not start off with the pawn in the center here whatsoever. He instead uses his pieces to influence these 4 squares. And we're going to see how that happens in the different ways that black will play this opening. So hypermodern, essentially, any kind of hypermodern opening is where you're using pieces to influence the center, to control the center. You're kind of using pieces more than you're using pawns. What would be a more classical opening would be if black is putting a pawn in the center in one of these 4 central squares. That's a little bit more on the classical side of things. So this Queen's Indian Defense, it is an opening that's been played by numerous grandmasters throughout history. Very popular at the very high level at the highest level of play, and it continues to be a very good opening down to this day as well. So from this opening position, we can already see a few advantages for each side of the board, pretty apparent here in this situation here. As tends to happen in most openings, white has gained a space advantage here. White does have 2 pawns on the c4 and d4 squares, while black has no pawns on his own 5th rank at this point. So white's been able to gain a space advantage, just like most white openings work out that way. However, on the flip side, black has a slight development lead, mainly because, well, I guess at the moment it's not development lead, but the king side is able to develop a little bit quicker compared to white's king side. Black can develop the bishop off of f8 anytime he wants, and white will need to make a pawn move before developing his bishop and then castling. So it might not be a development lead at the moment, but black does tend to castle a little bit quicker than white in a lot of these situations. Now, the other advantage for black, or I guess non-disadvantage, is that black really has no weaknesses in this position. There's really nothing specific for white to target. On the other hand, black can maybe put some pressure on these pawns in the center. So black kind of has targets, white really doesn't have targets, but white does have the space advantage due to the way the opening works. Now, on this third move, black has played the move b6, and black is essentially looking to either fianchetto the bishop to b7, where it's going to exert more control over the e4 square, or black may also decide to put the bishop on a6, which is what we're actually going to focus on throughout this video course. The bishop on a6 will be attacking the c4 pawn, and we'll be trying again to either, we're going to try to prevent e4, but we're also going to try to pressure white's pawns that are in the center where they are on c4 and d4 as well. So, ultimately, the main battle, once again, in this opening is going to be black's pieces exerting pressure on white's center, while white aims to solidify his center and retain or increase his space advantage as the game goes on. Again, if black is able to put enough pressure on white's center, then he might be able to gain the advantage. He might be able to break through and weaken white's center. While, on the other hand, if white is able to keep everything solid and safe, then he will use his space advantage to have the better position. So from this position now on move number 4, black has just played the move b6. This is the way the opening, kind of the setup goes for right now. Black plays b6, and now on this fourth move here, white has a few options that are reasonable. The main options that white can play from here are g3, which is going to be the main line that we're going to focus on in this video course. Other move options are knight to c3, pawn to a3, and pawn to e3. Essentially, each of these moves either looks to develop the light square bishop, which is the case with e3 and g3. Knight c3 looks to make the move e4 a little bit quicker, and a3 looks to prevent any bishop b4 pins so that you can play knight c3 a little bit later. Mainly what we're going to focus on throughout the video course is going to be the move g3. And the main reason that white tends to play g3, the main reason this is the, again, main line, is that by fianchettoing the bishop on g2, you're going to be kind of, white will be kind of negating a little bit of the power that black's bishop on b7 might have. And also, this bishop does kind of aim in the direction of e4 a bit, so this bishop's also looking to exert some control over the center from the fianchetto position. Now, pretty much in this position, almost, I wouldn't say, almost no matter which option white plays, whether it's knight c3, e3, g3, or a3, black will generally follow up with the move bishop a6. So that's going to be kind of the focus of this particular video course. Bishop e7 is perfectly fine to play in a lot of these situations as well. It's another very solid option. But we're going to focus on bishop a6 in a lot of these kind of throughout the rest of the videos and the game positions we look at. Mainly because I do feel that bishop a6 puts a little bit more pressure on white's position. Bishop e7 is very solid, but bishop a6, kind of by putting that pressure, it gives white the opportunity to make a mistake, and maybe we're able to get a quicker advantage through putting pressure on our opponent. So we're going to go a bit more in depth with each of these ideas for white and black in the second and third videos in the video course. But for right now, we're going to look at two examples briefly just to show how this opening can be played for white and how it can be played for black. Again, the next two videos are going to go more in depth on these ideas. So for now, we're just going to have brief comments on these two games here. So this first game example, we're going to kind of go through fairly quickly, but we'll again revisit this game example in one of the future videos. This first game example, we're going to see how black is able to win using active pieces. So let's copy this one onto the board. And this game is actually played, this was played in 2006 between Shakir Mamedyarov and Levon Aronian. So actually kind of two big names in the chess world even nowadays. So this was played about back in the year 2006 though. Let's see how the game goes. We're looking at it from black's perspective because we are focusing on how black wins using active pieces here. So the game does start off with the typical opening setup, d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, b6. White does the g3 main line, and black plays the bishop a6 move. We'll again talk about more of these moves in depth, but white decides to play b3 to protect the pawn. Black makes a check on b4 and then retreats back to e7. Seems a little bit weird to make the check and go back up to e7 after that, but again, we'll talk about the reason behind this in the upcoming videos. White plays knight c3, castle, rook c1, d5. Black is now putting a pawn in the center to challenge the control that white has. And also notice how the bishop on a6 is working with this pawn to attack the c4 pawn. White trades on d5. Bishop h3, white plays. Looks a little bit weird, but this is just the location of the bishop that you decide to put it on. c5 now. Castle, knight to c6. Bishop e3, rook e8. Pawn takes, pawn takes. So we can even see at this point, it went from white having the space advantage to now all of a sudden black is the one that has the space advantage. Now, white is going to try to attack black's center, but black is going to use his active pieces and active position in order to get the advantage. White plays knight a4 to hit the c5 pawn. Black plays d4 to kick the bishop away. Knight b4 attacking a2. a3, knight to d5 hitting the bishop. Bishop to d2, knight to e4. And we can really see here how all of black's pieces, or at least a good chunk of black's pieces, are very active and very well placed in this position here. Rook e1, bishop b5 hitting the knight a bit. Bishop f5, knight takes d2, queen takes, take the knight, pawn takes back. Now white has double isolated a-pawns. Knight c3, a very nice location for the knight. White feels compelled to sacrifice the exchange. c4, take, take. And eventually black goes on to win the resulting endgame where he is up the exchange, down a pawn, but up the exchange. He goes on to win a bit later here. Offers a queen trade, defends against some attacks, pushes around the white queen, makes a trade, and eventually he is able to win the endgame farther down the road. The game does have another 20 moves from here, essentially, but really the remainder part of the game is not really going along with our opening ideas. It's really just black converting his material advantage here. And this does take a while to do, but black is able to eventually accomplish this. Trades off there, maneuvers around a bit, wins an additional pawn, and essentially now, once the knight moves away, black will take the bishop, and then he'll move the rook over, stop the a-pawn, and black is going to be up a lot of material. So really here we saw, and again, we'll go more in depth with this example a little bit later in one of the future videos, but we really see in this example how black is able to use active pieces, he's able to pressure the opponent's center, and his pieces really become alive after a bit later, and he's able to win the game here. Okay, now let's go ahead and look at an example of how white can play, and in this situation we're going to see how white wins by maintaining his space advantage, by maintaining that space control, and how that helps him to win the game. So again, not showing a bias for either player or for either side of the board, really just showing how you can play this opening as white and also as black. So let's put this game on the board. This is a game between Veselin Topalov and Anatoly Karpov, played back in 2001. They're two very strong players. Of course, Anatoly Karpov was a former world champion at one point, as well as Veselin Topalov. Very strong players, they both were. So d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, b6, g3, bishop a6. Same setup we saw before. b3, bishop check, bishop d2. We see that same bishop retreat to e7. A lot of the moves here at the start are very similar. d5 here, pawn takes. Now in this case, black plays knight takes d5. He does not take back with the pawn on d5. And we're going to see how this could potentially be a little bit of a problem for black. Bishop g2, c5, still looking to exert pressure on white's center. Castle, knight d7, rook d1, rook c8, moves the queen. Bishop e7, e4, kicking the knight. Knight f6, d5, pushing pawns further up the board. And essentially here, if black decides to take the pawn on d5, and again, we'll talk more about this a little later, this is essentially a sacrifice at the moment, but white is going to get very active pieces here. He'll be attacking the bishop on d5, the pawn on g7, and black is going to have a rough resulting game from here. So black didn't go for that free pawn. He instead played bishop d6, bishop h3 again we see, h6, knight b5 hitting the bishop, bishop c3, the right knight kind of routes around to c2, into e3, trade off the bishop for the knight. Now, white does have the option of playing bishop takes c8 to win the exchange. He doesn't go for it in this case because he feels like his light square bishop is such an important piece. And then he finally does go for it the next move. So bishop takes c8, rook c4, queen c2 hitting the knight, trade of knights, rook e4. So white's up material now, and white's looking to exchange pieces to get farther into the endgame where he's going to have that material lead. Rook to d8, knight to c4, bishop f8, rook e5 hitting the queen, queen moves, queen e2, g6, d6, bishop e7, a bit of maneuvering here again. White picks up an additional pawn, and white just has to solidify his king position a bit and push his passed d-pawn down the board. Eventually, white was able to accomplish this. Eventually, there was a queen exchange that was going to happen soon, and black ended up resigning in this position here. So again, the game kind of goes a bit long, but the main point here, again, is how white was able to build that space advantage. He did get the move e4 in, and he was able to use his space advantage throughout the game, got a passed pawn on the d file, and that helped him to win the game later. So now that we've seen two examples of the overall play that can arise from this opening, we can really see that the battle lines in this opening are clearly drawn from the start, and it's an interesting fight that always ensues in the opening. It's going to be a battle of, again, white looking to use his space advantage and increase it, look to use that as an advantage over black. Black, on the other hand, is going to look to attack that center, use his active pieces, and it comes down to who can play better in those situations. So the main thing is, if you enjoy openings with clear ideas and plans with the possibility of opponents messing up along the way, if you like pressuring your opponent and putting them into tough situations, then this is definitely an opening I would recommend that you try out, especially after you watch the remaining videos in the video course. So be sure to check out the other 3 videos in the course, study the positions, learn from our discussion together, and apply the tips, tricks, and advice in your own games. And I'm sure you'll get a better understanding of this opening, and you'll be better prepared to play with or against it in your future games that you happen to play. Now, in the next video, we're going to go more in depth on the possible plans for black and how you can get strong play in a variety of positions. And I'll see you in that next video, and I will talk with you then. All right, have a good rest of the day, and I'll see you in that next video. Bye-bye.